input in its decision-making process. There are others, of course. In fact, there are 13 decision-making criteria that have been applied in the evaluation of options since it was endorsed in February of this year. That decision-making criteria that it be fulfilled was central to Council's selection of an option, and then throughout the narrowing of potential partners. Public input, both voluntary and sought, is one important ingredient here. This engagement process has been a journey with distinct phases. It's been a long engagement program with a variety of accessible opportunities for people to participate. Given the importance of the electricity distribution company for all community members, we designed and activated an engagement initiative to seek public input throughout the review process, which includes 4 community consultation phases. Communication and engagement has been scaled and staged, commensurate with each phase of this process. In phase 1, the focus was on raising awareness of the process and seeking public input on priorities and decision-making criteria. In phase 2, we sought to raise awareness of Council's February decision and of the 2 scenarios that would be examined closely from this point forward: maintain full ownership and merge in greater detail. In phase 3, we sought to measure awareness and support for the benefits and commitments of the proposed Guelph Hydro Electra merger. And in phase 4, if Council chooses to proceed, the City will continue to help customers and employees understand what to expect throughout the regulatory process until a merger is complete. Derek has already reminded us that during the first phase of the process, all options were on the table: buy, sell, merge, and maintain full ownership. As we know, the SOC presented preliminary industry research and analysis outlining the possible risks and benefits associated with each option, and it established decision-making criteria to guide the evaluation of options throughout the process. To the SOC and its staff advisors, our external financial and legal teams, and our colleagues at Guelph Hydro, the criteria made sense. But of course, we wanted to ensure the community thought so too before we applied it. So we asked people whether we had it right, and we did that through face-to-face conversations with average residential customers in Guelph and in Rockwood, at open houses, at community events, through surveys, both online, on paper, and on the phone with randomly selected samples, via community stakeholder consultations, and in special meetings with large customers. 68% of our community said we did get that decision-making criteria correct. So the SOC and its supports set out to evaluate sell, merge, or standalone against this community-endorsed criteria. Part of what we heard and reported to Council in this phase was opposition to privatization and hesitation with respect to the sale option. Council listened, took sale off the table, and directed the SOC and its supports to further examine a merger of Guelph Hydro with one or more publicly owned LDCs. Because the objective of the next phase was deliberately to inform rather than to solicit input, given the nature of the activity taking place during this phase, we don't report the same type of findings for phase 2. Rather, the types of activities we undertook in this phase to keep the issue on the radar of customers were as follows: pop-up information tables that we set up at locations across the city, energizingtomorrow.ca, which is the digital cornerstone of the program, an educational video, municipal websites and social media, local media relations, material that we distributed to Guelph Hydro customers in their bill, and communication from Guelph Hydro's leadership directly with its employees. Even when Guelph's team was meeting with and evaluating potential partners, with all of that work subject to confidentiality and to protect the interests of all utilities involved, the SOC on Council's behalf wanted to continue to let our community know that this work was underway. So we kept sharing what we could. All of these activities raised awareness of the asset review ahead of the merger announcement. This is important. A direct outcome of this is the 80% awareness you'll hear about in a moment. Part of why it was important to keep the topic on the radar of customers during Phase 2 was because we knew that Phase 3 would be shorter in comparison. And that's because of the diligence undertaken in Phase 2 as the SOC and its supports explored and evaluated potential partners. That process was exhaustive, it took considerable time, and it couldn't be rushed. The city announced it would enter an MOU with Electra on October 18th. Council and its representatives then let the public know why Electra was the preferred partner, and thus began Phase 3. This slide and the one that follows capture some of the activities we undertook to share information and solicit input. We conducted a telephone consultation survey, which I'll talk about in a moment. We offered a companion online version of that survey. We held open houses, again, more pop-up information tables across the city, community stakeholder outreach, and continued reliance in part on our municipal websites and social media. In addition, we deployed local advertising and paid social media, as well as owned social media, media relations, and public announcements. Members of the SOC contributed editorial content to our local news outlets. We established a dedicated community email and phone line. We updated print collateral and materials for residents, including a comprehensive booklet, which outlined details of the merger and information about Electra, and of course, continued reliance on energizingtomorrow.ca. We move into key findings for Phase 3 by theme on this slide, but just before we do, I'll speak briefly to the telephone consultation survey. We retained Oracle Poll Research to conduct a telephone public opinion survey among randomly selected representative sample of 500 adults, 18 years of age or older, who are permanent residents of Guelph and Rockwood. The purpose of the survey was to seek public input on the core benefits of the proposed merger and gain further insights into what was important to our community as we conducted our discussions with Electra. The 500 sample size makes this an extensive public opinion survey that reached diverse sections of Guelph's and Rockwood's population. To properly survey people on the core benefits of the merger, we needed to provide upfront information for each. The research firm helped us do this through its development of the questions. When the city launched the asset review, customers told us what is most important to them in a potential transaction: rates, service, community planning, local jobs, and environmental sustainability. Knowing this, we presented the core benefits of the proposed merger to the public so we could gauge how these benefits measure with community expectations. All respondents were provided with an opportunity to share their thoughts on the merger through an open-ended question. The vast majority of respondents had no additional feedback. Of those who did share their opinions through this open-ended question, we heard that more information about the merger is desired, rates are too high, which reflects the general mood across the province, that there is support for the merger, and that renewable energy is important. What the survey showed was that people largely support the benefits of the merger and that rates, service, jobs, environmental sustainability, and transparency are important. There are two sets of data from the polling on the benefits of the merger: the Oracle Poll telephone survey with its sample size of 500, and the Energizing Tomorrow unscientific online poll to which 53 individuals responded. The telephone poll featured 8 questions. Oracle Poll Research, an independent Ontario market research firm, designed and administered the poll on our behalf. Respondents were randomly selected using random digit dialing among Guelph and Rockwood residents, and both landline and cell phone numbers made up part of the sample. In total, 500 interviews were completed, yielding statistically robust findings. A sample size of 500 people produces results which can be considered accurate within plus or minus 4.4 percentage points, 19 times out of 20. Respondents of the scientific telephone survey were largely in favor of the merger's benefits based on the decision-making criteria. On the other hand, the online poll received a modest number of responses, 53 as of November 15th. The vast majority of the 53 respondents to the online poll are opposed to the merger. So to be clear, respondents who self-selected, who were motivated to talk about the topic, were opposed, as seen in the findings from the 53 surveys. Customers who were randomly selected responded favorably towards the merger for the most part. The slides that follow show the results of the phone poll, and in the interest of transparency, though we're not suggesting the online poll carries the same validity, we have shown those alongside the findings from the self-selected online poll. In terms of awareness, as you'll see here, in both surveys, awareness was high. 80% of respondents in the phone poll said they were aware, and not surprisingly, that number was even higher in the online poll. So in a crowded environment where countless topics compete for people's attention, 80% of Guelph Hydro customers are aware of the proposed merger, and that's a significant finding. This slide shows responses to the rates question. In the phone survey, half of respondents said they're supportive of a merger given the likely impact on rates, and 1/3 are not. 16% said they didn't know. In the online poll, by contrast, only 19% said they're supportive given the likely impact on rates, compared to 64% who said they were not, and 17% were unsure. This slide shows responses to the question about impacts on jobs. In the phone survey, 77% of respondents said they support a merger that maintains jobs in Guelph and generates new local jobs. In the online poll, by contrast, only 34% said they support a merger under the same circumstances, compared to 53% who said they did not. When we shared service scenarios with respondents, 46% of those polled by Oracle Poll agreed or strongly agreed that service would remain the same or improve under a merger. 28% disagreed and 26% didn't know. In the online survey, only 19% agreed and 66% disagreed. With this next question, respondents were provided with the elements of the transaction that would see Electra invest resources so that Guelph would be better positioned to innovate. When asked whether they agreed, 51% said they did and 31% did not. 19% of those who self-selected to take the online poll agreed and 60% did not. This question, this next slide, gauged response to how Guelph's dividends would change under a merger with Electra. Almost 70% of those polled by Oracle Poll said they supported a merger if it meant dividends to Guelph would increase. 25% said they did not. Of those who self-selected for the online survey, 32% said they supported a merger given the positive impact on dividends, compared to 55% who did not. When asked whether respondents felt Electra's investment in Guelph via the Great Centre was a good direction for Guelph, 67% of those polled by Oracle Poll agreed and 26% disagreed. In comparison, 45% of those who self-selected for the online survey agreed and 36% did not. This is the last of the data slides from the public consultation survey, so it's a good time to say clearly that we are confident the public opinion survey provides a solid representation of how the public feels about the proposed merger benefits. At the same time, the public opinion survey is one of several channels the city deployed to seek public input. The community engagement report includes public input received via all activities. Just very briefly, these are captures of the material that went out in the community. They're simply here as a reminder that we were active in our efforts to inform. Samples here include materials from bill inserts to digital ads to ads in cinemas and more. Finally, we've used analytics and industry measurement tools to report on some of the outcomes of our efforts to communicate our citizens and our customers and to engage. We appreciate that programs like these are only useful if A, they reach people, and B, if people participate. Some key numbers that are highlighted here. Our efforts to reach customers through our local media had a reach of almost 8.2 million. Our efforts to inform through advertising resulted in 1.9 million impressions, and our social media program resulted in just shy of 700,000 impressions. We generated 760 randomly selected responses from customers via 2 phone polls, one in phase 1, one in phase 3. Saw 6,200 unique visitors to energizingtomorrow.ca. Held 6 open houses to which 109 people attended, engaged with 242 individuals at pop-ups across the city, and held 23 meetings with stakeholder groups in our community. In closing, we think it's fair to say that response to this significant outreach program has been moderate, that there hasn't been overwhelming response either for or in opposition to a merger with Electra. And that in some ways is as telling a finding as any. One can infer from that that there's a lack of strong sentiment either way among the general population. I appreciate that may or may not seem the case tonight with a long list of delegates, all of whom care enough about this issue to come before Council and speak to it. But I would be remiss if I didn't remind Council that's why the statistically valid portion of the research be given considerable weight, because it does reflect the sentiment of the population at large in a way that other engagement channels cannot. That concludes our presentation on the engagement program. We're confident and hopeful that these results are useful to Council in its decision making. Thank you.
At this time, I'd like to ask Troy McDonald, our financial advisor from Grant Thornton, to come for his presentation. And Ron, sure, we'll allow you to. Sorry about that. Okay, all right. And Ron Clark from Air Burles, legal advisor. So thank you very much.
So hello, my name is Troy McDonald from Grant Thornton, so thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight.
My name is Ron Clark from the law firm of Aird & Burles. Again, it's a privilege to appear before you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. We're going to be giving a presentation on the transaction, including the process and the features of it. Some of it we've kind of heard important aspects of it, but one of the first things we'll go through is the process recap. To a large extent, I think this is talking about issues that have already been covered by your CAO and your communications employees. It's worth it to emphasize that this is where we are today represents a process that started in September, the culmination of a process that started in September 2016. There's been months of work. This is the third council touch point and decision point to get to this process. The process has been rigorous, careful, and comprehensive. It's gone through 3 phases, as was mentioned. An environmental scan. There were 14 LDCs scanned and considered as part of the initial process. Quite a few, a comprehensive process. A preliminary business case was developed with regard to a number of them. Then a selection was made to enter into further discussions with a small subset. Due diligence, detailed legal agreements and shareholder agreements were negotiated with a particular one selected after that process, which was Electra. And again, that decision to move forward was made by council and the Strategies and Options Committee, as we've heard. And tonight we're here to move forward or not on that transaction. So the recommendation before council is here tonight, and to get to this point, as I mentioned, we've had exclusive discussions with Electra. GMHI has, that's Guelph Municipal Holdings Inc., the wholly owned corporation of the city of Guelph. The parties have prepared formal valuations, have done extensive financial modeling. There's been extensive financial, legal, and operational due diligence with respect to Electra, and the preparation and negotiation of legal agreements. as well as operational planning, and we've heard about the ongoing and extensive community engagement. The GESI Board of Directors has also approved the transaction before you and is recommended going forward.
Right, so the key highlights of the proposed merger are the significant financial savings and efficiencies that are being realized. This leads to improved customer outcomes, as well as a stronger dividend. And then strategically also the great center and the regional operating hub for Electra in Southwestern Ontario being based in Guelph. So these are some of the significant outcomes that come from the merger, or the highlights. One of the things to be aware of is the industry is going through a lot of consolidation. So you see some of them highlighted here on the slide. So 2017 was a year of major consolidation. This has been driven by both business and strategic reasons, but I think most importantly, industry change, which is driving a lot of communities to think really hard about what they want their future to look like and then make decisions to pursue what they think is best for those communities.
One of those changes and the processes and the trends is the technology that's caused people to start talking about the concept of Utility 2.0. So what is Utility 2.0? Utility 2.0 is an entity that is responding to new ways that electricity is moving through the grid and being delivered to and now by customers. The traditional model has been a centralized generation facility that generates electricity, moves one way through the transmission system, and then the distribution system is delivered to customers and customers consume it. We're moving towards a distributed model where customers are empowered to generate their own electricity and to purchase not only from a centralized generation facility, but use their own electricity, store electricity, purchase from their neighbors, and a highway that no longer is a one-way movement of electrons, but is electrons move in multiple directions. And this is in many ways why the status quo is not an option for any utility, not just in Ontario, not even just in Canada, but around the world. Utilities are struggling with these new models and really a different way of dealing with electricity and a different way of making money. The traditional revenue models are under attack as well in terms of the traditional LDC. So what are the types of behaviors now moving forward into this new world? And we're not making a judgment. I can say with a fair degree of certainty, in my opinion, these changes are coming. Reasonable people can disagree on the rate of change, and I completely accept that. Is this 5 years away? Is this 10 years away? Is this 20 years away? You can have that discussion. At a certain point, distributed generation reaches what's called grid parity. In other words, it's just as cheap to generate yourself as it is to get electricity from the grid. And at that point, of course, you've got customers that potentially defect or no longer relying on electricity from the grid. And obviously, that's a fundamental threat to the revenue model of any distribution company. So what are the trends we're seeing? We're seeing people using less electricity, particularly less electricity from the grid, more electricity at night, potentially, as we move into a world where electric vehicles become more common. They're charged at night, in all likelihood, and not during the day. And then, as I mentioned, people generating their own electricity, which not only creates the ability, and I would throw in store their own electricity, and their neighbors are generating more electricity as well. So they're consuming possibly from the solar panel on the roof, from the storage facility that they've got, or even when their neighbors have solar panels, there may be interchanges among neighbors as well. It's obviously a very different way of consuming electricity than has traditionally been the case. So that sets us up for talking about what are the risks of moving forward with the transaction and the risks of not moving forward. And we recognize that there are risks on both sides. Moving forward, so first of all, let's talk about the standalone path to achieving Utility 2.0. There are issues around lack of scale and financial capacity. There are there's exposure by customers to rate resets and increases. The risk that the provincial government will continue to encourage, if not force, mergers, and where is the standalone utility in that scenario? Missed or delayed opportunities to realize merger savings as that process continues. The dividend is under threat, potentially, from as the traditional revenue model itself is under threat for the reasons we've talked about. And then there's potential loss of first mover advantage to become an important consolidator or part of one of the first utilities in southwestern Ontario to become part of something larger, which means if you are a late mover in this game, then the potential to save jobs and maintain a center in Guelph is also at risk. Of course, there are risks in choosing to merge as well, and we recognize that. There may be less savings than projected. There may be a loss of dilution of control, and we're certainly talking about a transaction where control is not what it would be in a standalone scenario, and we recognize that there are cultural alignment and challenges between the organization.
Right, so the standalone business case was a focus throughout, and that led us to conclude that the merger with Electra was the best path forward. And just to go to the financial slides. It was a robust process, and we have provided a fairness opinion. The key outcomes are the 4.63% ownership and the dividends, both the special dividend and the increased dividend. This gives us a $29 million lift over the standalone. It's important to note there's no controlling shareholder, so Guelph has 4.63%. The dividends are $10 million higher due to the synergies, and then after 10 years go back to the ratepayers and they're passed through to rates. This illustrates that rate savings over time, which you can see is significant as forecasted rate increases are avoided that would be expected under the standalone scenario. And additionally, you can see here some of the savings or the efficiencies that emerge from this. You see the summary of the annual synergies, both operating and capital, but in addition to that, you can see the fundamental efficiency of the MergeCo or of Electra's operating and maintenance structure or costs relative to the standalone. So it's a significant savings that leaves Guelph well positioned to pass value to the customers in the long term.
So the customer benefits are sort of divided into two periods. There's an initial 10-year period following the transaction where rate increases continue to be below inflation, and the customers would still be better off than the standalone option during that period. Meanwhile, there are, of course, increased dividends at the shareholder side, but we'll leave that aside. This is about the customer benefits. After the 10-year period, and this has to do with the regulatory rules around Ontario Energy Board and when you come to apply for different rate revenue increases or not increases, or you present your rates. So after 10 years, in fact, the benefits of the transaction and the synergies that would be derived thereby do flow to the customers. And every year after that time, after that 10-year period, there are more than $5 million of annual OM&A and capital synergies from GESI and $50 million from the original Electra merger that would flow through to the customers. This is significant money, and this is significant money even on an individual basis. In terms of the rate-making considerations I alluded to, so the Ontario Energy Board, which is the regulator, and which I should add, will have the final say on whether this transaction occurs, and they certainly have the customers in mind when they assess whether the transaction is acceptable or not. During this 10-year initial period, GESI will continue in its own standalone rate zone, and the other Electra service territories would also continue in their standalone rate zones. The increases would continue to be below inflation, and that's during the initial 10 years. And then following that, what's known as the sit-out period, when the utility does go back to the Ontario Energy Board for new rates, the rates will be reset, and at that point the synergies are realized and the savings are passed along to the customers. So, what are the customer benefits? Access to greater resources when responding to major outage events. And this is aside from the rate story, this is the customer service story. Improvements in customer experience through leveraging best practice across both utilities. Improved reliability, infrastructure upgrades, a commitment that a southwestern Ontario operational centre will remain in Guelph, and a commitment around minimum number of jobs that will be there as well. Local crews will continue to respond to local outages and other issues. In better emergency support, because you have the ability to access neighboring Electra service centers as well in the worst case scenario. And that's because of the geographic diversity of the resources, and future-proofing the system with business continuity planning. In addition, there will be 24/7 control room operations, a nighttime technical call center to better address outage calls, nighttime social media support, and 24/7 access to customer self-serve as well. The commitment to safety remains and will continue GESI's excellent service record in this regard. At the end of 2016, the consolidated results were 7.7 million hours without a lost time injury across the utilities. And here comes my favorite part. So what's the transaction about? So let's talk about the actual transaction. So in the top right corner, you can almost make it out if you use a telescope. Anyway, the squares in blue are the top, the top one is the city of Guelph, and just below that is Guelph Municipal Holdings Inc. So what this shows is the end state post-transaction, how Guelph and GMHI will fit into the existing Electra corporate organizational structure. So you'll see that Guelph is sort of parallel in terms of ownership with the other municipalities, which include the city of Mississauga, of which OMERS has a 10% stake in their holding company, city of Hamilton, city of St. Catharines, Vaughan, Markham, and Barrie, in addition to Guelph. And you'll also notice that Guelph has the same ownership percentage as the city of St. Catharines. Each of those shareholders, the cities own each of their municipal holding companies, and in turn they own a collective holding company called Electra Inc. And Electra has a number of subsidiaries, the most important of which in terms of value certainly is Electra Utilities Corporation, which is the regulated distribution company, and the current Guelph regulated distribution company, GESI, would be merged into Electra Utilities Corporation. And there would be some kind of share exchanges to get Guelph and GMHI the shares in the Electra Holding Corporation. Just as importantly as Electra Utilities Corporation, going forward certainly is other subsidiaries that are committed to operate in the unregulated sphere. In other words, it's poised to take advantage of, well, meet the challenges and take advantage of the new opportunities in the new world of Utility 2.0 that I discussed earlier. In terms of board representation, it's important to note that Guelph, through GMHI, will have the right to appoint a director of Electra, and that's on a permanent basis. The director would be independent, and by independent we mean not a member of council or an employee of the municipality. There's been a lot of discussion about whether this is the road to privatization. And the answer from where I stand is no. There are multiple protections against privatization of Electra, and we've thought about this and worked through this carefully. In the unanimous shareholder agreement, It represents collectively the work of and the agreement between a series of municipal shareholders, none of whom plan to privatize. There is the ability to sell shares in the private sector only up to a 10% level, which moves you from a municipal corporation exempt under tax to a taxable corporation, and that's a significant barrier there. Should you move across that threshold, which is at the 10% level, in other words, if there's private sector ownership beyond a 10% level, there's a 22% transfer tax that's payable under provincial legislation. There's also a departure tax, which adds some more potential liability. And there'd be significant burdens on the shareholders in terms of the value subtraction and destruction to a certain extent, should that take place. And then finally, the like-mindedness of the shareholders is not to be underestimated. These are other municipalities that have the same kind of intentions. They're like-minded. They see their future in the municipally owned space, and they're really much like Guelph. I think we've come to discover through the due diligence process, through the discussions, in terms of how they see the future and the importance of municipal participation and ownership of the distribution utility as we move into that future. So what are the key legal agreements? There's a merger participation agreement, which is the agreement that would be signed shortly after the approval process. And that is a commitment to a further process, and it's a binding legal commitment to a further process, let me make this clear, to then go before the Ontario Energy Board and submit an application under its mergers, amalgamations, and acquisitions and divestitures. That's a mouthful. We call it MADS, M-A-A-D-S. There's a defined process for the Ontario Energy Board to consider amalgamations and transactions involving regulated distribution companies. So the merger participation agreement commits the utilities to move forward with that process. Should that process be successful, and we think it will be, and that application be successful and the OEB approved, then there's the commitment to carry out and implement the transaction and to sign a unanimous shareholder agreement. There's an existing unanimous shareholder agreement between the shareholders, the current shareholders to Electra, and in many ways, Guelph would become a partner on similar terms and conditions that currently exist, with accommodations that are specific to Guelph, just to allow Guelph to come in. Generally speaking, it's similar arrangements. So the unanimous shareholder agreement isn't something that's going to be negotiated later. It's a schedule to the merger participation agreement. So as you can see, I want to emphasize, approval of the transaction today and approval of the merger participation agreement is really approval of the transaction post the OEB process, and is a commitment right now to, at that time, enter into the unanimous shareholders agreement as well. The USA itself governs the relationship, voting rights, governance issues around Electra, and also governs how the shares, transfers of shares, restrictions on transfers of shares, et cetera, and provides protections around ensuring that each shareholder has rights to protect its shareholding and its ownership percentage. To get into more detail, the unanimous shareholders agreement lays out requirements and obligations and rights around all of these areas, including guiding principles, board representation, dividend policy, what fundamental decisions require unanimity, and what require special shareholder approval, which is a special majority, share sales and restrictions, financing the corporation, etc. The merger participation agreement, as I said, commits to a process. It does set out the percentage ownership, the approach to closing adjustments, closing deliveries by the respective parties. Importantly, covenants that have been made on rate harmonization by class, such that, and there is protection for different classes of customers within Guelph. There's protections around jobs. There's commitments around reliability and customer service, and indeed, even commitments around continuing to use the Guelph Hydro brand following the transaction so that the transition is smooth and is not surprise or uncertain for residents. There's provisions around exclusivity and information sharing during that interim period between the MPA and the transaction. And again, very importantly, commitments around an innovation center, we call the GREAT Center, Green Energy and Technology Center. So that's a new entity, certainly a new project within Guelph that focuses on new technologies and innovation. And also the Southwestern Operations Hub is a continuing commitment that the operations of the distribution utility within Guelph will continue to stay here, and in fact potentially will service additional territories in southwestern Ontario should there be additional transactions. So this is important in terms of a commitment to jobs and a center, business center and operations that stay in Guelph. And then there's various other protections as well in the merger participation agreement. So I'll turn it over to Pankaj Chaidana, the CEO of GESI.
Thank you, Ron. Good evening, Council. So I guess the package deal continues. So let me, Ron's remarks just now is a nice lead up into the Southwest Ontario Operations Hub. And I just want to go over this and emphasize what Ron has said, is that this is a key piece of this transaction. We think it's very important. And I think that's shared by Electra as our partners in this, in that their operating strategy focuses on improving service delivery to their customers, increasing shareholder value through growth and productivity improvements, improving internal operation efficiencies and asset utilization, and also developing and maintaining highly skilled employees. So those are core values that are embodied in this operating philosophy, and we certainly share in that. They are, of course, committed to preserving and enhancing this centre, as Ron has mentioned, for at least 10 years, and we hope for much longer than that. And we think it's ideally positioned now as Electra's strategy starts to unfold into the future. So Ron also mentioned the Green Energy and Technology Center, and again, that's a key piece of this transaction, which we're very excited about, and we believe that Electra is equally excited about this opportunity. Much has been said about the Utility 2.0 model, so I'm not going to belabor you with those details again, but I think there's a clear recognition that these changing times require innovative solutions, and this is a piece of the puzzle that will help us bring some of those innovative solutions to bear as we move forward into the future. So again, there's a lot of information here. Certainly in the interest of time and with the number of delegates we've got, I don't plan on going over all of this in detail, but happy to take questions later. And let me then turn to some human resource issues. Actually, prior to me doing that, let me just tell you about the commitment that Electra is showing to this centre. So they're committing $5 million in capital to the Green Energy and Technology Centre, as well as an operating budget of $3 million annually. And that's significant, I think, for this community. Okay, so when I get to the Electra employee philosophy, again, there's a list of things over here that we are quite appreciative of, but I want to focus on about 4 or 5 of them. So if you go down to the third bullet, they're seeking synergies through many avenues, not only headcount reductions, and that's important. They're targeting to reduce vacant jobs before staff jobs, and that's important as well. developing fair and targeted voluntary separation packages. And this is an emotional time for many, so this is very important. And then, the last bullet, communicating frequently, accurately, and with integrity. And I think we've been doing that all along. So, as we've said, the employee impact, there's 130 people in Guelph Hydro. 70 of those existing positions are expected to remain in Guelph. 30 are expected to be relocated in the other Electra service territories, and then 30 positions will be dealt with through retirements or attrition or voluntary separation. Okay?
Great.
And due diligence.
So due diligence, a very robust diligence process was undertaken. So Grant Thornton did financial diligence, Aird and Burles did the legal due diligence and is completing that, and Metzco did the operational due diligence to make sure all facets were fully considered. Based upon that work and the details reports which were provided to GMHI, there was no critical issues, and we felt that all of the issues identified were appropriately addressed and resolved through the legal agreements or through the financial terms of the transaction. And based upon that, we were satisfied that due diligence was appropriate and satisfactory. And I think in conclusion, we just wanted to confirm, and we've talked about these points throughout the presentation, but based upon the work we've done, we're confident that the criteria that were set out from the start have been achieved, both in terms of the community, the shareholders, and the customers, to make sure that this transaction meets the goals of Guelph and for its community. So, thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So we appreciate the presentation. And what we would normally do at this point is we would come back to council and then we would ask a bunch of questions to staff. I'm going to change things up tonight because of the list of delegations and to respect all of you that are here. We're going to immediately go into our delegations right away. So if you are called, please come forward. Just to set some ground rules, and I'm going to make sure I adhere to these rules tonight, steadfast here. So 5 minutes. Doesn't matter who you are, you got 5 minutes. You will have hear a chime at the 4-minute and 30-second mark, giving you that 30-second warning. And then if there is any follow-up questions, and it will be questions only, please, council, then it will be allowed at that point to delegations. And with that, I'd like to call up our first delegation, which is Norm Loberg, the chair of Electra, Inc.
Good evening, Mayor Guthrie, councillors, residents of Guelph. My name is Norm Loberg, and I'm chair of Electra, Inc. Having heard Ron a little earlier this evening, I'm going to reinforce a couple of key points that he made that I think are very important and crucial to this merger transaction. But before I do that, I'd like to provide an overview of Electra and let you know that we are honored to join with Guelph Hydro to the benefit of all our customers and communities in both organizations. As you know, Electra is a municipally owned local distribution company that services 15 unique communities of all sizes and demographics, from Penetang in the north to St. Catharines in the south. We are owned by 6 Ontario municipalities, as you saw earlier, and OMERS is a small owner percentage-wise of Electra as well, and of course OMERS is an organization that many people around this room are familiar with. We value each of our communities and embrace their respective cultures and heritage. We are here to help them, our communities, achieve their unique goals by supporting them in many ways. Financially, through dividends and sponsorships. Socially, as these are the places where we live, work, raise families, play and volunteer. And environmentally, with our goal to make our communities a healthier place than when we started. Some have asked why Electra is interested in Guelph and specifically Guelph Hydro. For starters, we have a common view of the future. Guelph Hydro's stated mission is to be ranked as one of Ontario's top electrical utilities, trusted by stakeholders to provide continually increasing value while playing a role in the rapidly transforming energy sector. A mission and values we share and are consistent with Electra's vision to become Canada's leading electricity distribution and integrated electric solutions provider. Guelph Hydro and Electra are like-minded energy companies owned by forward-thinking municipal shareholders. We both recognize the value of public ownership of electric utility assets and are committed to maintaining strong local presence within the communities we serve. Over the course of the last several weeks, we've worked with our Guelph partners on the business case to merge Guelph Hydro and Electra. And during this time, the matter of possible privatization of Electra at some point in the future has been raised as a public concern in Guelph. So I welcome the opportunity to reassure you that, consistent with our strategic plan approved by our shareholders, and to be clear, there are no plans in place or even contemplated that would result in the loss of municipal control of Electra. I sent a letter confirming this to Jane Armstrong, Chair of Guelph Hydro, last month. Another issue I'd like to address is the concern that Guelph's voice would be diminished by joining with Electra. I'm pleased to tell you all communities within Electra's service territory have a voice, including those who don't even have a seat on the board, communities like Aurora, Brampton, and Richmond Hill. But the City of Guelph will have a seat on our board and will have equal say and rights identical to those of current board members. So I applaud Guelph Council for recognizing the need for change in the electricity industry and doing everything it can to keep future electric prices as low as possible for future and current customers. The energy industry is undergoing an unprecedented transformation which necessitates pursuing new business models for publicly owned utilities. This transformation was the catalyst for not only the creation of Electra, it was also the reason for previous consolidations undertaken by our legacy utilities and others in the industry. The proposed merger presents the exciting opportunity. Am I out of time?
I'll allow just a few more seconds to finish up there.
Okay, I'm just wrapping up. For Guelph Hydro and Electra to join forces to build an energy company that is second to none in our industry. It would include working alongside our cooperative communities that constitutes Electra by continuing to build a company we can all be proud of. So I hope you'll approve the recommendation to have Guelph join Electra's family of companies so that we may discover the possibilities together. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, sir. Is there any questions from any members of council? Go ahead, Councillor Piper.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome, Mr. Loberg, to the City of Guelph. At one point in your presentation, you used the word energy solutions provider instead of LDC. And I'm just wondering if you could articulate what you see in the changing energy economy is the vital difference. And then part two of that question is, what percentage, just, it doesn't have to be accurate, 47.3% kind of accuracy, what percentage of the focus of your board is on transitioning to that new futuristic energy solutions provider role?
Well, as I indicated in my comments, this industry is changing and changing rapidly. I've been associated with the energy business for more years than I probably should admit to, but it's always been under constant change. But the rate of change today is incredible. So what we're looking at is we have a core business It's a very strong business. It's the basis for allowing us to do many other things we would like to do, and that's turning to a focus of what we call non-regulated business activity. So that's the services business. That's the business of providing power to our customers in unique ways, working with third parties, working with governments to develop new and improved methods of power delivery. So in terms of the degree of interest, we've given our management a full mandate to investigate and pursue new business opportunities in this sector, and to some degree beyond. We're thinking outside the box. We're not saying no to any initial idea. We're considering all potential ideas that would grow the business in a non-traditional way. It's important. We have a 3-year objective to make sure that we achieve all of the goals we've set out as far as synergies are concerned with the 4 companies that have come together. We would continue to work along that path, and we have, in terms of managing that process, we've said in terms of the Guelph merger that we would hold off on any full integration of Guelph until we've satisfied that we've met those particular objectives for the synergies of the 4 companies. So bottom line, keep our eye on the ball as it relates to the core business, but explore any and new opportunities in the non-regulated business that'll contribute to the bottom line of the organization.
Over to Councillor Alt.
Thank you very much, Mayor Guthrie. Through you to Mr. Loberg. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's a quick question, and it's a question for comparison. You made reference to Penetang in the north, and my comparison is for the purposes of understanding the Guelph hub. Is there a northern hub of similar character to what's envisioned for Guelph?
You know, I'm going to defer that question to
for later
our
on
CEO,
okay, I'll ask
when he comes along, because he has a full understanding of that. We have hubs throughout the whole area. Whether it's similar or not, I can't comment.
Okay, hubba.
Yeah. Good.
Okay, that's it at this time. So
okay.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Richard Piccini, you are next, and Dr. Ron East, you are in the wings. We have a presentation from you, sir.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. I'll be brief. I know you're busy tonight. Thank you for the opportunity. I want to try and persuade you tonight to step back a sec, rethink your February decision, and put the sale option on the table. And everything I've heard so far tonight really reinforces that. So if we could flip a slide, please. Thank you. So you've spent a year and you've spent $1 million and many, many hours of staff time, and you decided to look at market trends and to look at 3 options. That was the asset review. In February, at a progress review meeting, you decided by a 7-5 vote to drop the sale option. And as I listened to council debate the issue at the time, it was very clear that it was retained local ownership. It may be a neighboring merger, maybe something small where we'd still be in control. Those were your words. Okay, you made your decision, dropped the sale option because that's the way you were headed. But in October, it's a mega merger. And so I ask you, and I ask you to ask yourself, is giving our asset to Electra in a merger, this mega merger, really better than selling the asset to a qualified bidder? Probably Electra or someone else that you deem qualified. 4.63% ownership. That means you've given up 95.37% of control of this asset. Roll that around in your minds. how far distant is giving up 100% control? You could still be one of the communities that writes a letter to the board. I think you really need to recognize that the February decision, when you made your October change, you should have at the same time said, hey, we need to put the sale back on the table and let the public see the potential benefits. Now, your decision, many people may not know, your decision precludes staff from further consideration of the sale option and your advisors, and it was clear. Nobody even was able to mention or breathe the word. So knowing some of you are ex-teachers, I decided to give you a report card. Did a bit of research. Used your criteria. Current employees, no question, status quo. Mega merger, sale, it's the new world, so I give them some credit. And some of the potential sale partners for whom Guelph would not be a little outlier in the territory, some merger partners may be a heck of a lot more central, and your job situation could be better, but I rated them both the same. New jobs and investment. Here's the Achilles heel of the status quo. You can't finance the Hydro 2 or 2.0, whatever you want to call it. The mega merger, agreed. The sale also. With a qualified bidder, you go in that future. I would say the Electra offer of $5 million capital and $3 million operating is far, far less than what sales in Peterborough and Orillia both generated for those communities in terms of new jobs and new investment. Far, far less. Electricity rates for residents, and I'm one, my conflict of interest, the suggestion is it'll be slightly less than with Guelph Hydro. But again, in sale communities, 5-year rate freezes. Even a reduction, which they may not get, but 5-year rate freezes. I'd sure as hell enjoy a 5-year rate freeze in Guelph. Reliable service, I just put that because they're all the same. Urban Ontario has good electricity providers. I've lived around the province. It's a red herring if you want to go down that path. The green future for the community, again, the limitation of Guelph Hydro and not being able to fund the future. But either one of your qualified bidders will be able to do at least as well as Electra. It may even be Electra. The one that I think you're not really getting the picture on is the financial return. It's suggested the dividend will be higher, but only because they have a rate policy of 60% of revenue. Guelph Hydro could do that. But the risk of dividend is if they choose to invest in further acquisitions, your dividend goes down and you've got no control of the board. I did the numbers at $125 million at 3.5% interest. You could get an annual dividend in excess of $5 million. And that's not even to speak of the premium. So there's my request. Please reconsider. Put the issue back on the table. It should take you no more than 4 weeks because you have all the information at hand. You have Electra as a potential bidder.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. Does any councillors have any questions at this time? Seeing none. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Dr. Ron East, you are up. Steve Dick, you are in the wings. Welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, Mayor, councillors, I want to thank you for this opportunity to delegate as Chair, Council of Canadians, Guelph Chapter, on the proposed merger between Guelph Hydro and Electra. I'm not against an amalgamation in principle. However, if the Electra deal goes through, it will be the largest asset sell-off in the history of Guelph. An unsecured investment of $2,700 for every man, woman, and child in this city. In February, you passed a resolution to examine a merger with one or more publicly owned local electricity distribution companies, LDCs, and that any reference to sale be removed from the resolution, and that the SOC shall not make commitments to any potential transaction partner. What has actually taken place, in my view, is in breach of your own resolution in the following ways. 1, you have undertaken a sale of Guelph Hydro, even though it is being called a merger. This deal involves a cash settlement of $18.5 million plus 4.63% of shares in this private company in exchange for turning over all of Guelph Hydro and Envida to the sole ownership of Electra. That, in my view, is a sale. 2, in addition, once you have accepted, you cannot sell your shares without incurring prohibitive 22% tax payment. 3, you can never recover this utility for obvious financial reasons. 4, you will have almost no say in the affairs of the company since you are a small minority shareholder with one position on the board of directors and little shareholder protection. 5, Electra, a private company, may distribute its shares as it pleases with the agreement of a majority of the shareholders. And in effect, this company, in my view, can be controlled by 2 shareholders, Vaughan and Mississauga, with the support of OMERS. Guelph will have little or no say in its own future. As reported in the Hamilton Spectator, at the time Horizon became part of Electra, their 18.15% share at that time resulted in $13 million dividend. At this rate, Guelph will receive $3,316,000 annually. This is only $316,000 increase over what Guelph Hydro already pays. Research in the US has shown that there is on an average of 43% increase in rates due to privatization of public utilities. Why is Electra the exception? The profits and rate reductions presented are actually being calculated and averaged over a 24-year period. There has been no comparable accounting of the growth potential of Guelph Hydro and Envida as a standalone over the same period. Brian Bentz stated that he is confident Electra will avoid the death spiral of higher rates, a decreasing customer base, and rapid disruptive innovation. A large company like Electra is locked into its infrastructure expenditure, long-term contractual generation agreements, union contracts, and pension liabilities, and may not have the flexibility to respond to rapid disruptive changes in the marketplace. And there are few public utilities left who are willing to be gobbled up by Electra. Selling to a foreign utility provider does become a very real possibility. Guelph, with one seat on the board, will have no say in this kind of transformation. And there are alternatives. Kitchener Hydro, together with Cambridge and Waterloo, could be a more prudent choice. Guelph could maintain control of its own utility and its assets, while saving through cost-sharing arrangements and pass these savings on to the ratepayers. These local public utilities are much more capable of adjusting to rapid innovation in the electricity sector while maintaining local ownership and control. However, we will never know. We were not provided with any other options. Finally, with regards to the Electra Green Energy and Technology Center, it is my view that this facility will act like a big box store, replacing the infrastructure of smaller green energy and technology proponents already in place and growing in Guelph, with a one-stop facility, privatized, largely unaccountable, and catering to an entire region. As a result, we will lose the opportunity to develop our own enterprises and create more jobs right here in Guelph. This, in my view, points to a bigger problem.
Are you just about finished, sir?
Yeah, almost finished.
Perfect.
Lack of confidence in Guelph's ability to govern itself. A vote to reject this deal is a vote for Guelph, for its people, and for control of its future. Please stop this merger.
Thank you. Before you go, sir, is there any questions for the delegate? Seeing none. Thank you very much. So I didn't mention this off the top, and I should have. So my apologies. I'll apologize. And this is going to sound like I'm being bossy, and I don't want it to come across that way. But we have procedural rules here in this arena when it comes to decorum. And we have a mix of delegates tonight that are going to be both, wanting to advocate for, maybe against, or as we had another delegate say, you should sell. We don't know what people are going to maybe be coming up and saying. And so I would respectfully request that there is no kind of, uproar or clapping or anything like that, because we want to be respectful to whoever the next delegate is that's coming up next and what their point of view is as well. So I ask that respectfully of the people that are here today to maintain that decorum here. Thank you very much. And with that, Steve Dick, you are here. Paul Costello, you are in the wings. The floor is yours.
Thank you, staff and councillors and citizens, for your work, your hard work, grappling with the question, do we push the yes button on the merger with Electra? Looking at Energizing Tomorrow website, I see that city staff and leadership are motivated to move this merger forward. I want to respect that while pointing to a better way forward. As president of Guelph Solar, I have insight into the renewable energy sector. The cost of renewable energy continues to fall. The cost of centralized generation continues to rise. There is very legitimate concern that Ontario's nuclear power and centralized natural gas peaking power will become uncompetitive. The good news is Guelph Hydro is not facing these concerns. Yes, there will be more local generation, electric cars, air source heat pumps. They're all coming. There will be 2 to 3 times more power flowing through Guelph Hydro's wires. Guelph Hydro currently has peak saver technology that can manage our loads. Page 77 of our merger document highlights that we have the capital in hand to get Guelph to Utility 2.0. Page 77. So on a capital basis, please push no on the merger. This proposed deal fails to meet citizens' #1 interest. Rates will not be lower. Number 2, it undervalues Guelph Hydro by about $60 million. Number 3, instead, we can look to other municipalities that have negotiated higher market value for the utility, and we can learn from them. City staff did a great job engaging citizens to find out what we cared about. Lower rates was our #1 concern. All communications from City Hall about the merger claim that rate increases under Electra will be less than a standalone Guelph Hydro. This assertion is not based on the facts. I quote Jay Shepard, the Toronto-based lawyer. Electra's 2018 rate increase is 2.84%. Guelph Hydro has also applied for a 2018 rate increase using the same formula, and it's 0.23%. Electra and Guelph used the same formula, but Guelph didn't ask for more money. Guelph Hydro has historically been able to live within its budget without extras and still make a good profit, end quote. A merger will result in significant efficiencies. Electra has not made a commitment to reduce our rates. Horizon and Collingwood residents negotiated a 1% reduction in rates when they merged with Electra. So on rates, you can push no to the merger. But my big concern is that we've been too eager to move this deal forward, and it'll cost us $60 million tonight. In 2008, Guelph considered a merger with Horizon and St. Catharines Hydro. Guelph Hydro would get 24%, St. Catharines would have been 16%, Horizon would have been 60%. In the current Electra merger, Guelph Hydro is 4.63% and St. Catharines is 4.63%. In 2008, Guelph Hydro was worth 40% more than St. Catharines. If you push yes on the button, you're saying in the last 9 years, the value of Guelph Hydro has plummeted by $36 million, and this simply is not true. Guelph is a gem. We have a lower debt ratio than Electra. That is why the merger would pay the city $18 million special dividend. Electra is leveraged to the max that the Ontario Energy Board allows. 60% debt to equity. Guelph Hydro is in a better capital situation than Electra. We only have a 50% debt ratio. It is Guelph Hydro's policy to pay a 50% dividend on net income. Electra's policy is to pay a 60% dividend. This extra dividend may explain why Electra is short on capital and is pressing the OEB for rate increases above the standard formula. We have Grant Thornton's fairness opinion. It counted the poles and transformers and came up with an opinion, but not a fair market value. Waterloo Hydro North, which has fewer customers than Guelph Hydro, has a value of $200 million. The $129 million that Electra is offering is not a good deal for us. I'm almost done. We need to ask Grant Thornton. What we needed to ask Grant Thornton was not, is 4.63% fair, but what is the best strategy to ensure that Guelph gets the highest ownership interest? And I'm just going to follow. So this deal, it doesn't get us lower rates.
Okay.
It doesn't account for the
10
growth.
seconds, okay, Steve?
Yeah,
yep.
It doesn't account for the growth potential that we have here in Guelph, and it undervalues Guelph Hydro by $60 million. Guelph is in a great situation. Please don't sell us short.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there any questions for the delegation tonight? Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Steve, for your presentation. One of the things I took away from your remarks was that you, in your professional capacity, seem to have a different view of what others in your same industry are calling the death spiral. Can you say a little bit more about your own experience so that we can sort of examine the difference there?
Yeah, I will say that there is this potential for central generators and transmission lines to be in a very bad situation. That with distributed generation, local generation, cogeneration, the costs of local power can make those centralized assets uncompetitive. So I agree, there is that potential in Ontario. The situation that Guelph Hydro is facing is completely different. Guelph Hydro is going to be carrying more electricity, not less, as people's, their cars are somewhere else during the day, their panels are somewhere. You've got to get the cars charged. The cars are going to charge at night. Air source heat pumps. I'm saying, 2 or 3 times as much power is what homes are going to need. The technology to manage those new loads, it's not rocket science. We're already doing it with Peak Saver.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
And thank you very much. Thank you. Paul Costello is next. And Diane Hurst, you are in the wings. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, City Council.
The floor is yours.
With experts like Steve Dick, I just decided I'd share a couple of concerns that I share. Seems to be unanimous with my neighbors of mine and friends. For example, Richard Challoner, who has been here before, in a letter he sent to you, councillors, he said, if Electra intends to grow, why would it be in the interests of Guelph to be a shrinking part of a large and expanding enterprise? Richard led the campaign against privatization in 2008, and I hope some of the experts behind me can do the same. Guelph, I think, with plans to grow and a projected 60,000 more people, would use its demonstrated competence and resilience in the face of new and disruptive technologies to continue with our own high standards. And I ask, why would we burden ourselves with old technology of a slapped-together conglomerate when we are growing into the perfect size to deliver existing services and nimble enough to quickly be transformative? The truth is that Electra is a conglomerate slapped together to be sold to a larger conglomerate. When that happens, and it will, Guelph will lose all power, and indeed any say whatsoever on matters involving hydro. I really don't think with Conservatives and Liberals in our provincial legislature that the 22% penalty is going to last very long if you privatize. So, once this is accomplished, the Electra conglomerate, or the next one, will expect us to give them our water, and we will. The example that Council should examine before any decision is EPCOR of Alberta. Well, this company is ostensibly owned by the people of Edmonton. Its tentacles reach across North America into unregulated enterprises worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Things like water systems in Arizona and New Mexico. Most Edmontonians don't know what business ventures are entered into under their name with money borrowed in their name. EPCOR and its expanding subsidiary, Capital Power Corp, could easily collapse under the weight of desert water projects and money borrowed to buy them. The connection to Electra, that binds Electra and Electra Energy Solutions to EPCOR and Capital Power Project and all of this unregulated activity is the former CEO of Power Stream and now the CEO of Electra. Mr. Bentz has a strong relationship with EPCOR, and he actually includes it in his biography. For some reason, Capital Power and Mr. Bentz don't specify what that relationship is. I think Council needs to know more about Mr. Bentz, and I think Guelph citizens need to see and debate the secret draft agreement between Guelph Hydro and Electra. Thank you. Question?
Thank you. Any questions for you, sir, from councillors? None. Thank you. I'd like to caution everyone in their remarks that we respect those that are in the room in the best way that you can as we move forward, please. Diane Hurst, you are up next.
Right.
Donna Jennison is in the wings. If you are here, the floor is yours, Diane. Thank you.
Good evening, Guelph City Mayor and Guelph City Councillors. Thank you for this opportunity to present to you on the proposed merger of Guelph Hydro with Electra Inc. As someone who lives on a modest income and who may never own a home or a condo, when hydro rates go up, rent goes up. In fact, almost all the necessities of daily life go up when there is an increase in hydro rates. I am very concerned about the current proposal that Guelph Hydro merge with Electra Inc. I have found it quite difficult to locate balanced information on the proposed merger. Much of the information provided to Guelph residents has been marketing about the positive aspects of joining with Guelph Electra, with Electra Inc. Electra Inc. is a newly formed company created in February 2017 with a very large customer base, and there are no comparators, so it's difficult to make a good assessment of the proposal. I noticed in the materials that there was lots of information on the projected future of Electra Inc., but no information on the projected future of Guelph Hydro. I was concerned about Electra. The new company does not have a track record, so I did some of my own research. I learned that Guelph Hydro, according to the Ontario Energy Board, is an efficient business. There are some utilities that have better scores, but Guelph Hydro looks good. Guelph Hydro is a magnificent Guelph asset. I learned from a May 23, 2017 KPMG report on Waterloo North Hydro that the electricity grid is undergoing significant transformation to become clean, distributed, and intelligent. This transformation is being driven primarily by the ever-increasing cost of power, disruptive technologies, and climate change policy. Declining costs of distributed energy resources such as solar and battery storage and rising customer empowerment challenge the status quo. Local distribution companies, LDCs, are the operators of Ontario's electricity distribution grid that links central generation and the transmission system with local customers. By leveraging their existing customer relationships, expertise, brand recognition, and knowledge of their local distribution networks, LDCs are uniquely positioned as the most efficient and cost-effective service provider to lead the transition to cleaner, more interactive, and more intelligent grid. Looking to the future, there will continue to be significant changes in the energy landscape that will continue to transform the utility business model. There will be a shift away from the largely one-way power system, relying principally on large centralized generation plants and conventional transmission distribution infrastructure, toward a highly networked ecosystem of two-way power flows and digitally enabled intelligent grid architecture. This rapidly unfolding energy landscape will present challenges as well as opportunities that will require a new, nimble strategies and approaches. This report raised the following questions for me. Why was Guelph not given options to consider in the same way that customers of Waterloo North were? What was Guelph's response when contacted by Waterloo North Hydro in March of 2017? Given that the future of electricity distribution is with LDCs, what were the reasons that Guelph Hydro did not decide to merge with Waterloo North Hydro Inc., or with Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro Inc., or with Energy Plus Cambridge? All these cities are close to Guelph, and they are similar in size. We would always have a say in important decisions and about our hydro services, and we already have shared services with some of them. Cost savings and energies are typically enhanced when the merging LDCs are geographically close. It is important for our councillors to take more time with this decision. It is, after all, one of Guelph's largest assets, some $225 to $230 million worth, that the people of Guelph own. I am worried that Council is being asked to make a decision tonight, right in the midst of all the challenging work of the annual operational budget, and receiving important information tonight through the Guelph citizens' delegations. I would like Council to consider a merger or partnership with a local publicly owned facility with a track record. I would like Council to consider other options and to bring those options to the people of Guelph for considerations as they did in Waterloo. There's no need to hurry this important decision. The City of Guelph is a places to grow community and will be needing more hydro. Please defer this decision until there is a good and balanced information available to the public and to the councillors that represent them. Thank you.
You rushed perfectly in your last 30 seconds. That was just perfect. No questions, anybody at this time? No, and thank you very much, ma'am. Is Donna Jennison here? Yes, she's coming down. George Kelly, are you here, George? No? No? Hi. Okay, if George, if you're here, you're in the wings. Donna, it's over to you.
Good evening, Mayor Guthrie and councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to address this really complex file. It's difficult to participate in a meaningful way here on this issue, and I am here because I am inherently suspicious of the consolidation of power in huge corporations, and it throws up a lot of questions for me. With this huge merger, would we not be giving up our voice at the table on one of the most critical issues, services of our times to a large and essentially unaccountable corporation? The Canada Corporations Act allows unlimited concentration of power and minimal public accountability or legal liability. Electra is the second largest publicly owned utility in North America and wants to grow bigger through additional mergers and acquisitions. They're able to debt finance by acquiring private investors who can supply additional capital. The OEB is required to allow providers the opportunity to recover their reasonably incurred costs of providing service. In their efforts to recover costs and increase profits, would this, what I consider a kind of hybrid corporation, consisting of municipal and private shareholders, behave like any other corporation, single-mindedly seeking profits through rate increases, press for deregulation around conservation measures, look to public subsidies, and externalize costs. Would they replace good-paying full-time jobs with temp and contract positions? The larger a corporation is, the more influence it has to force others to bear its costs and therefore subsidize its profits. Would Guelph Hydro customers be responsible for guaranteeing private sector investor shareholder revenues, exorbitant CEO salaries as Electra grows? The interests of corporations, especially large corporations, diverge from the broader human interest or public good, with no regard for local interests. This institutional reality is the centerpiece in the breakdown of a contemporary democracy. According to Harry Glassbeak, senior scholar at Osgoode Hall Law School, the corporation has become an ideological shield against intelligent introspection and civic responsibility. To question its doctrine has become heresy. I'm questioning it. Pending trade deals like CETA and the Agreement on Trade and Services make governments impotent and democracy a facade by further enlarging corporate rights and reducing their responsibilities. With the ratified CETA, we would not be able to remunicipalize Guelph Hydro. In Germany, 170 municipalities have brought energy services back into the public sector, and communities across the globe are seeking to reverse privatization. I understand this isn't privatization, but it feels like a slippery slope. By merging with this hybrid corporate model, are we not taking one giant step closer to privatization? Positioning ourselves at considerable expense to the city as attractive to investors in the lucrative energy market. What guarantees do we have that Electra would not be sold to private investors in the future? The point of privatization is neither economic efficiency or improved service, but simply to transfer wealth from the public purse to private hands. Public service values include serving the common good, being accountable and responsible, and speaking truth to power. Healthy societies depend on healthy, empowered local communities that build caring relationships and help us connect place and earth. I know a merger is not privatization, or is it? In this day and age of corporate power, influence, and control, it is a slippery slope, and privatization could very well be the outcome. I firmly believe this is not what is in the best interests of Guelph citizens and business community. I am against the merger with Electra and strongly advocate for an escape clause if the merger goes forward, and I hope it doesn't. An escape clause that enables Guelph Hydro to leave the merger without a financial penalty in the event of a decision to privatize. That should be very easy to provide if these assurances are, in fact, accurate. To finish, I just want to acknowledge
Yep, just another 10 seconds. Go ahead.
Hydro's awesome job. I mean, we had Pankaj come to a breezy breakfast one morning. Would that happen if Electra was? I have a crush on Pankaj now. So thank you.
What?
Mr. Mayor, this is being televised, right?
Yeah. What's your Lava Life profile? Yeah. All right. So, no questions? That was, yeah. So no one's giving out any phone numbers. We're all good. Now, I said George Kelly. Is George Kelly here? Okay, then the next is Colleen Pierce. Is Colleen Pierce here? Yes. And Dan Burtons, I hope I'm saying your name right. If you're here, you are in the wings. Welcome.
Hi. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I'm here on behalf of Guelph Hydro's IBW 636 members and want to touch on a couple of points specifically as they relate to the proposed merger. Guelph Hydro's commercial and industrial customers currently have close working relationships with Guelph Hydro staff. Over decades, staff in Guelph have built up one-on-one relationships with its larger commercial and industrial customers, such as Linamar, UOG, Polycon, to name a few. These customers know that when they call their contact at Guelph Hydro, they can ask any question from billing inquiries, power quality and power factor correction, to engineering and operational issues. They also know and appreciate that their contact will help them from start to finish with participating in provincially administered Save on Energy programs. We have been hearing from our commercial customers in our day-to-day working relationships that they are very concerned about losing this valuable level of service should we merge with Electra. And we feel their concerns are valid. In our opinion, this one-stop shop type of relationship is not part of the proposed merged utilities business model. Large utilities have to do things differently based on their sheer size. Projects are passed through a siloed corporate structure that involves several departments with multiple contacts, and a move from energy services to energy sales involves transitioning salaried employees to a base salary plus commission workforce that has to meet quotas. This type of assembly line customer service and pay for performance is not conducive to hearing and understanding our customers' needs. Because of Guelph Hydro's close relationship with its commercial and industrial customer group, our community exceeded both energy and demand targets set by the province in the years 2011 to 2014. We were only one of 4 LDCs to accomplish this. And for the 2015 to 2020 provincial target on energy, we're already at 70%, while having spent about 50% of our budget. In contrast, the 4 founding Electra LDCs are in the high 30% range of their energy target for 2015 to 2020. As well, the Great Centre is another area of concern. In brainstorming sessions with well over 75 stakeholders representing the Guelph community, it seems that many attendees came away wondering what was so great. There was no clear direction, and attendees were told to imagine money not being an issue and encouraged to just throw out ideas based on a term repeatedly referred to as the power of the possibility. When pressed for information regarding funding, attendees were told that some money would come from Electra, but money would also be sought from municipal, provincial, federal funding programs, grants, and private funding. Local groups already embedded in Guelph to provide our residents with conservation assistance are concerned about duplication of programs already being offered within the Guelph Hydro service territory, as it has been communicated that the Great Centre will focus on residential green energy solutions. However, these residential offerings must be beyond the research and development stage, but also not already in the mass market. They must be customer friendly, palatable to the average consumer or resident. This is to be a for-profit venture, so the Great Centre is supposed to come up with residential products that already have the heavy lifting done, are ready to go to market, and are things that residents want but haven't been seeing in the marketplace. It seems like a pretty slim business plan. Along with the non-specific budget, it's not definite how many employees will work specifically for the Great Centre. Could be anywhere from 7 to 15. We don't know what kind of jobs they will be. Will they be unionized, well-paying jobs with benefits and pensions? Will they be contract jobs? Will they even be full-time jobs? The budget is supposed to be around $3 million a year, but there's no guarantee for how long the Great Centre will operate. The proposed Great Centre is not part of the regulated LDC business, so if it fails, like Select Power, and like some of the Envita projects through GHI, it can be closed down as quickly as it's started up. If funding gets cut off, if the residential market is indifferent to the products offered, the Great Centre can disappear with no fanfare. The problem statement from the proposal reads, the current business model for Ontario's energy sector is quickly becoming outdated, especially within the context of local distribution companies. These changing times call on industries to provide customers with green solutions. Guelph Hydro is well known in the industry as an innovator and forward-thinking company. Our smart meters with Zigbee chip integration was a first in the province. We are part of Grid Smart City. We have flywheel and microgrid test site already in place. We have solar installations on 2 of our buildings, and most importantly, we have key staff.
Okay, is it just a wrap up 10 seconds? Okay.
A couple more sentences.
Yep.
We've done projects like thermal energy storage, cogen, combined heat and power. We've got the skills. Are we willing to throw away 60 good paying, long-term, full-time jobs in the community for the power of the possibility? Are we willing to throw away 100% of control of our local utility for a high-level plan of what might happen based on the proposal with no detail? The speculation far outweighs the potential for loss if the Great Centre fails. This proposed merge is nothing more than the breaking apart of a well-run, successful local company for future promises.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you for those last couple of sentences. It was 6 or 7, but I let it go. Yeah. Any questions? None at this time, so thank you very much for coming. Is Dan Burton's here? Yes. Mark Goldberg, you are in the wings.
Good evening, Mayor Guthrie and councillors. My name is Dan Burtons. I am a Guelph Hydro employee. I am also the unit chair for the IBEW. Back in October of 2016, it was announced that the City of Guelph would be looking into options with regards to their assets, one of these assets being Guelph Hydro. Initially, there were a lot of questions about why this was even being examined. After all, Guelph Hydro has been providing reliable electricity in the community for over 100 years. During this time, Guelph Hydro has been an industry leader, building a robust smart grid system, facilitating and green energy initiatives, and providing excellent customer service. We have been able to do this all the while putting no financial burden on the City of Guelph. Quite the opposite. We have been paying them a handsome yearly dividend, a gift that keeps on giving. Fast forward to February 2017. The sale of Guelph Hydro was taken off the table, but it was decided to explore mergers further. It was also made pretty clear that a merger would be desirable if it were with like-cultured, neighboring LDCs, and that the owners of Guelph Hydro wanted control over their utility. Equal shares within the utility with 1, maybe 2 partners. We're listening has been the city's catchphrase throughout this whole process. Community input was to be used to select the perfect partner for the potential merger. Guelph citizens, business owners, and Guelph Hydro employees would be able to lend a hand to steer this ship. After all, it is their utility. The City of Guelph and SOC weren't listening. Choosing Electra for a partner proves this. Is Electra a bad company? No. Is it the right partner for Guelph? Absolutely not. Let's get the painfully obvious out of the way. Electra isn't a neighboring utility, and a 4.63% stake in a company hardly provides the equal control that people were looking for. My confidence in the SOC and supporting city staff quickly eroded from there. As soon as the announcement was made, anything the city posted in articles or on social media was pro-merger. Call me foolish, but I like to be objective when forming an opinion on something with this big of an impact. The city is trying to sell this merger to the people of Guelph, not give them an unobstructed look. This is very apparent in their survey on the Energizing Tomorrow website, as well as the question asked in the phone survey. It is all by design to give them positive feedback that they want. In all reality, aside from the city and SOC, I have yet to hear one positive comment about this merger. Each legitimate concern voiced online is met with an insincere spam bot-like response from the city. The people deserve far better than this. There are key facts given by the city that are half-truths or a play on words. An example of this is in regards to the fate of employees from Guelph Hydro. The city downplays the fact that 30 jobs will be eliminated. They say approximately 30 positions are expected to be addressed through attrition, voluntary retirement, or voluntary separation whenever possible. There are an additional 30 employees who will be forced to relocate to other cities for work. This is described as a relocation opportunity. That's a really positive spin considering 60 well-paying jobs would be eliminated from the City of Guelph. To put things in perspective, this is almost half the current staff of Guelph Hydro. These people not only work in Guelph, many of them are valued tax-paying members of the community. When job loss is brought up, it is brushed off by the fact that 8 to 10 undisclosed positions will be created through the Great Centre. this is hardly comforting. Merging with like-cultured entity was also a key point in the selection process. No disrespect to Electra and their employees, but how does a company establish a culture when they have only been in existence for less than a year? Guelph Hydro possesses an excellent working environment. We have worked hard over the years on our union management relationship, which is very apparent. We have developed a strong bond amongst employees as well as with businesses and residents within the Guelph community. We as employees also continuously meet and exceed mandated targets by the OEB, and our scorecard is a direct reflection of that. We are overachievers in the industry. I am very proud to say I am a Guelph Hydro employee. The very appealing $18.5 million special dividend has also been thrown around an awful lot. The way this has been presented, it would almost seem as if this money is a direct result of the merger. The fact is Guelph Hydro has $22 million in cash at the moment. Electra doesn't want this as cash, as it would dilute the current shareholders' percent further, so it is being passed back to Guelph as a special dividend. This cash is already available without a merger. Why should Guelph Hydro choose to merge at this instance with this company? Electra isn't necessarily the best option, they are the only option at this time. City staff and the SOC have also maintained that now is the time to act. If we wait, they tell us, Guelph Hydro will become less valuable. In my opinion, in a heavily regulated field such as the electrical industry, a utility, especially a top performer like Guelph Hydro, wouldn't lose value rapidly. If this was the case, every other mid-sized utility in the province would be scrambling into a merger today. Am I opposed to a merger? No. I can agree with the SOC on at least one detail. We need to keep our options open. Am I opposed to pushing this merger through before people have the chance to digest the pros and cons? Why not let Electra move past their honeymoon phase before we jump into bed with them? How can council be expected to vote on this?
Excuse me, if the people in the audience could please be quiet as this delegate finishes. Just a couple more seconds, please.
Yep. The people of Guelph, whom they represent, have had just 12 days to go through a 245-page report. Where is the transparency there? Something of this magnitude deserves a fair look at unbiased information. In the end, there is only one shot to get this right. We cannot rush this decision. There's no going back. If this merger proposal is passed, the Royal City's crown jewel will be lost for good.
Thank you, Dan, very much. And please, I would request that, as I said earlier, to be respectful to anyone else that's coming up after. Dan, thank you for your presentation. And is there any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Mark Goldberg, you are up next. And is Francis Papillon? Papillon, sorry. Are you here, Francis? Great, perfect. You're next, okay? Mark, you have the floor. Go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mark Goldberg, and I'm here tonight because I'm passionate about Guelph. I've lived here for 35 years, raised my family here, started my businesses here, and I am very concerned about the future of the community, and that's why I volunteered to be a member of the Strategies and Options Committee. The Strategies and Options Committee has, for the past 15 months, reviewed the operations of Guelph Hydro, as well as the electrical industry in general in Ontario. And we found that Guelph Hydro is a very well-run, very reliable, very responsive utility. And I don't just say that because Punk is just standing beside me here. It is a very valuable asset, and the future of it is very important to the city. The problem with Guelph Hydro is not Guelph Hydro itself, it's that the business model is broken. And the asset value is at risk because of that. So for many years, over 100 years, Guelph Hydro has operated in various forms by taking electricity off the grid, selling it, distributing it to local businesses, and marking it up to pay for the cost of poles, wires, and people to maintain those poles and wires. And that markup is regulated by the province through the Ontario Energy Board. The problem is that that model is no longer valid. Homes and businesses now don't just buy electricity, they generate it and they sell it. And consumers are demanding innovations that we cannot afford. We ask the board and we ask the management if we have the capacity to do this type of innovation and supply the types of energy solutions that the chairman of Electra referred to earlier. And we don't have that type of capital. We don't have the capacity to do that. and therefore we cannot evolve into utility 2.0 as it's called. In the meantime, we're facing what has been referred to as a death spiral, and that's not being dramatic. It's a very well-known term in the industry. As the price of electricity goes up, people say, I'm going to generate my own, put solar panels on their roof, and the remaining people on the grid have to pay for the cost, so therefore the price goes up. As the price goes up, more people leave the grid. That's the death spiral. So the strategies for Guelph Hydro are listed here. The riskiest option is doing nothing because the value of the asset will eventually degrade. The only option really is to merge. And with your blessing, we had a hunting license, if you like, to go out and talk to many different utilities. We talked to 14, as was mentioned earlier, and we came up with many different potential partners. Some were not ready, just as we were not ready many years ago to merge with Horizon. Some were not the right fit. For example, they wanted us to close our center at Southgate Road and move all our trucks and people to their municipality, which would decrease our responsiveness. And of the 14 we talked to, Electra was not only the best, it's the ideal merger partner. Here's why. It is owned by 6 other municipalities, and they have the same core values. They do. There are municipalities in Ontario, they have the same core values we do. Now, collectively, they are big enough to innovate and avoid the death spiral by developing on the unregulated side services that people want. Second of all, it's an excellent deal for Guelph financially. Our rates will be frozen for 8 years. They won't go up. And the dividends will increase. This has been modeled very carefully by Grant Thornton. Service and reliability will be maintained because we will keep our Southwest Operations Center at Southgate Road, so the responsiveness will be there. We will have a permanent seat on Electra's board. Now, we won't have complete control, as we do now, but we will have some control. 1 vote out of 13 is a say on the matter. And as I say, these are like-minded municipalities who want the same thing we do. But the crown jewel of the deal is the Great Center. The Great Center will help us pursue our community energy initiatives. It will create jobs, and it will have economic spin-offs. Not only that, we found out that large industries are often attracted by the stability that Electra would bring. We heard that from the mayor of Barrie, for example. So that again will generate economic activity, and therefore I think it's a great deal. So the conclusion is, in my opinion, and I've studied this for 16 months, Electra is our ideal partner. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the timing of your presentation too. Perfect. So is there any questions for Mark at this time? Okay, Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Mark, for your presentation. I know you to be a real advocate and a participant in our community energy initiative, and you did mention it in your report. You said that the Great Center may be a way to incorporate and enhance our CEI. I wonder if you could speculate more on how do you think that would look and how it would play out, and what, in other words, how we could keep the CEI as in its most robust, effective form through this merger?
Thank you. Well, when we talked to Electra, we asked them why they were interested in Guelph. And they told us basically one of the main reasons was that they had been thinking about this great center. We didn't really have a name for it, but the Green Energy and Technology Center for a while. And they thought of it as a seed looking for fertile ground in which to be planted. So they consider us to be the fertile ground because we have the Community Energy Initiative. In other words, we have a population that is ready to adapt to new technology. We want to reduce our energy usage. We want to embrace new green solutions. And therefore, this is the right place for the Great Center. So the Community Energy Initiative, from our perspective, is the means by which we can achieve reduced greenhouse gases and greener solutions to energy, and do that locally. So through the Great Center, we can achieve our initiatives and hopefully meet our community energy initiative goals.
Terrific, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Bill has joined us, so good to see you, and a question over to you.
Thank you, through you, Your Worship. As a member of the SOC, were you party to the discussions around the share allocation in Electra, the 4.63%?
I was not part of the discussions. We had our negotiating team negotiate directly with them, but they would come back and inform us of the discussion and ask for direction and decisions on some of those negotiations.
So were you aware that in the previous merger discussions with Horizon that our share allocation was 40 to 50% more than St. Catharines, and in this case it's equal?
Yes.
And do you have a response to why we have such a low value in this transaction?
Yeah, I believe Troy would like to answer that, but not this time. If you could just park that question.
Oh, okay.
I think park it then. Yeah, just park it. Yeah.
I think quite simply the answer is
Mark has a wrap-up comment on that, though. Go ahead.
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think quite simply, had we merged with Horizon at that time, we would now own a larger share of Electra. Simple as that. Electra's value has increased disproportionately to our value. I'll let Troy give you the details on that later.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Francis,
thank you.
And I'm not going to try your last name again. I'm sorry, is here. Mike Nagy, I saw you walk in. Yep, so you're in the wings. And the floor is yours, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you. Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to delegate on the proposed merger between Guelph Hydro and Electra. Let me start by saying that in principle, I'm not against a possible merger with Guelph Hydro with other utilities. That said, I feel like we have not been given enough hard information and real analysis to properly consider this deal. No other options have been presented, and I'm not sure that any other options have been seriously considered. While researching the subject, I found a study commissioned by Waterloo North Hydro Holdings Corporation for the City of Waterloo by the consulting company KPMG from May of this year, in which they explored 4 options: the standalone, merger, purchase, and sale for Waterloo North Hydro. These options were explored by providing both the pros and cons of each scenario. And as a part of this study, they asked the public for input before the detailed research was completed and got a clear understanding that if Waterloo North Hydro was going to merge, buy, or sell, it must be with a local public utility of a similar size and in the immediate geographic area. This coincides closely with the resolution passed by this council in February. The board of Waterloo North Hydro provided this report to the general public for their consideration. Waterloo looked positively at the possibility of merging with Guelph Hydro, and I'm left wondering why this wasn't pursued vigorously by our administration. We have been told by members of GMHI that Waterloo would not be a good fit because it is poorly managed, in considerable debt, and had a large rural catchment. However, Waterloo North paid the City of Waterloo a $5.3 million dividend last year. I don't have all the numbers, but to me that doesn't sound like a utility in trouble. In my view, this is what the people of Guelph expected: an open and transparent process with real options to consider. A merger with a publicly owned utility that is close by and is of similar size would allow us to keep control of our utility, retain our asset, and share costs to reduce rates. Instead, we're planning a merger with the second largest electric utility in North America, for an $18.5 million dividend, which, as previously stated, actually comes from the cash holdings of our own utility, plus 4.5% of the shares, with no shareholder protection, no say in our future, or any real shareholder security. Is this really good value for an asset valued in the range of $200 million? Let's think back to 2008. Council made a good decision at that time, and because of that decision, we have retained the value of a sizable public asset. The deal with Electra seems to be a speculative leap into the dark with the taxpayers' money and no chance of ever getting our utility back should things not work out as anticipated. I don't believe that is what the people of Guelph signed up for. Also, Guelph has a number of local organizations and individuals with real knowledge, skill, expertise, and entrepreneurship related to the green energy revolution. We could be using Envita to support them. And if we consider merging with Waterloo, we could bring to the table one of the best innovation center in the world at the University of Waterloo. Just imagine what we could do together. This could be a fantastic opportunity to develop a Made in Guelph innovation district, create jobs, and have a cutting-edge utility which will be nimble enough and tech-savvy enough to respond to the transformational changes that are happening in the energy sector while maintaining local control and ownership. Every deal has an upside and a downside, and we expect that our administration and councillors will do their due diligence on our behalf. I recommend that you delay this deal until you have explored other options and share that information with Guelph residents before any decisions are made to dispose of one of our most valuable assets. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. Sir, there's only one person in this whole room who is from GMHI. Do you know who that is?
I don't.
Okay. So in your presentation, you mentioned that someone from GMHI told you some facts in regards to Waterloo North. And I'm highly concerned about that, so is the rest of council when you made those statements. Okay. I will be following up with our staff here to comment on what has just been said. But the fact that you said that you talked to someone from GMHI.
Oh, I never said that I talked to somebody.
You sorry?
I said that.
Yeah, please explain.
No,
I would love you to. Please explain.
I merely said that I accessed a study that was done by them.
By GMHI?
Apparently, yes. For Waterloo.
KPMG.
Oh, KPMG.
Okay.
What did? Yeah.
Thank you.
KPMG.
Thank you. You are wonderful. Thank you. Yeah. No, that made us all go a little bit whoa, because obviously there's some information that is confidential with any business negotiation, right? With any business negotiation,
yeah,
there's confidential information, and I wanted to make sure there was no one in this room.
Oh,
that was...
I gotcha.
Okay, thank you, sir. So I'm done, and I'm breathing a little bit better now.
Okay, all right.
Councillor Salisbury is also done. I think he was maybe good to mention the same thing. So thank you very much, sir.
Sorry.
No, don't say sorry. It's all been cleared up. You're good to go.
Thank you.
It's all good. And the next one is Mike Nagy. And then after that, we have Jerry Barker in the wings. So Mike Nagy, go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thanks for the opportunity tonight. I'd like to start off by going to this positive, happy spiral and opposed to the death spiral, because I think this is so much negativity about Guelph Hydro right now and its future. I would like to start off by quoting something my father always said to me, in a lesson that's been good to me every time over the years. A quick deal is usually not a good deal, Mike. And this, combined with, I think, is a manufactured sense of urgency, raises some major concerns regarding this decision tonight. There's a very clear atmosphere or theme that this is a one-time offer, never to be repeated. Act now before it's too late, and yet Boxing Day hasn't even begun yet. Hashtag watch the rush, and what does Electra know that we don't know? I know we are being told that this is not rushed and that we've talked to others, but I haven't spoken to anyone who feels there's ample time to make such an important decision, and one that I think has an unnecessary imposed deadline. I also have concerns that Mr. Benz is going last at this discussion, because I think this is our night to speak, and I think they had their chance in unfettered access. So I have a little concern about that, and I think we should be able to question that later. That said, I want to speak to some important points. In 1999, the RBC evaluated similar sized utilities as Guelph Hydro to valuations of about $100 to $125 million. Guelph Hydro was worth about $100 million at the time. Just want to talk in as a matter of argument, if we had sold Guelph Hydro, which we're not talking about selling so much, we would have netted $50 million after taxes. Since then, it appears that we've received well over $50 million in paid out dividends, and this is while owning full control and planning the future of the utility. It is, as was mentioned earlier, a gift that keeps on giving. It is insinuating that this merger is the only way we will survive in the long term because we are too small. Yet there are dozens of smaller LDCs in Ontario, most of which are thriving. Guelph Hydro isn't even small. It's actually in the perfect medium-sized area, the sweet spot where we want business to be nowadays, and we already belong to a like-minded group of utilities in the Grid Smart City Cooperative, therefore already belonging to a supportive group which we are would sad to see us go, and I urge Council to speak to them directly and not through others, to hear their story. Bigger is not always better. It's just an old marketing slogan, and in my opinion, the benefits being marketed remind me of the municipal amalgamation argument in the 1990s, which turned out to be a failure due to loss of local input, higher costs, and bigger government. It is hard to find a report that supports what happened with amalgamation, and in 2015, the Fraser Institute released a report that supports that it was a failure. Bigger is better is a myth, and bigger always leads to even bigger and bigger, then followed by dismantling and sell-off and cherry-picking of assets. I have worked in the belly of the beast of the big energy. It's not a pretty sight. It is not something that we should rush into. There is no rush, and this proposal is poor timing and short-sighted. It reminds me of the sale of the Highway 407, a gem of an asset that was liquidated for some early cash, and we've been paying the loss ever since. Guelph Hydro is solid and a growing asset that we need to celebrate and enhance, not relinquish because of an arbitrary deadline. If there are problems within Guelph Hydro, as there are with running any business, the solution lies in working hard to resolve them. So what are some of the reasons for supporting the status quo, meaning this asset remaining in our hands? The argument that we are too small to meet the growing needs of our customers, including industry, is false. Halton Region, Burlington Hydro are just two examples of similar-sized utilities meeting the growing demands of both industrial and residential customers. Guelph is growing leaps, and this will only improve our customer base and revenue, especially when combined with smart grid demands such as electric vehicles, rightly or wrongly, and more green feeds such as solar, etc. I don't see solar as a negative thing. Relinquishing Guelph Hydro now, I believe, is the worst timing, as I believe we are on the eve of great things. It could be similar to selling BlackBerry sales when they were $5 and went up to $18 just before the company peaked, giving that false sense of security that somehow it had peaked. Giving up Guelph Hydro now is a symptom of lack of creativity. It's some fear-based marketing, a temptation for easy short-term fix versus robust long-term vision and hard work that will allow Guelph Hydro to keep giving. Also, as Mr. Costello mentioned, 50% of Colas Power Stream has been sold to EPCOR, and they are a private water delivery system, and the CBC has reported that their profit first and service second mandate has been a problem. I believe this is something that we have to look into.
Are you almost done there, Mike?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
So I just want to say there are more reasons than not to keep this in this valued community asset than there are for merging. So I urge you to reject this deal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And is there any questions? Mike's, sorry, Mike. There's two mics, and I said that incorrectly. My apologies, Councillor Salisbury.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Nagy. You opened up your presentation, very passionate presentation, with the idea that this has been a quick deal. As someone who's been involved in this for almost a year, I'm curious as to how long do you think something like this we should take to do?
As long as it takes to get the right deal. It could be 5 years, it could be 10 years. I feel that we're just rushing. And a lot of us are very, very uncomfortable with this because we don't feel we have the tools to make even a personal decision, but we're not comfortable with this.
I respect that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing nothing further. John T. F. Jerry Barker is next, and is Cynthia Bragg here? Yes, you're in the wings, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Greetings from the small town of Guelph, which is growing rapidly. You know, I was kind of interested in the communications. I'm a communications guy, and I was really kind of interested in the presentation by Ms. Spriggs of all the things they did for the past year and a half, roughly, to communicate with the people. And this is the only thing I ever got in my hydro bill, which was just a repeat of the things that are on the Energizing Tomorrow website, and I don't want to get too started on that. And this is the boat anchor that you sent out online, and didn't, I bet you there aren't 250 people in Guelph that downloaded the thing and the size of it. I was very fortunate, I got a hard copy. So communications is very important here, and the score right now, from all the people you've heard, is 11-2 of people that don't want to proceed with this merger. And they all have given excellent reasons why we shouldn't. As far as I'm concerned, I say defer it. Let's step back. Let's have an opportunity to examine everything and get the truth. Because we don't have the truth. You know, I'm here to represent the 55,000 hydro customers who don't even know what's going on, haven't got a clue. Because the communication's been so narrow, focused, and organized and managed to achieve the goal of the merger. And I'm sorry, I'm not buying that. And I think that the council has a responsibility here to step forward and say, look, let's have another look at this. Let's examine it all. Let's communicate with the people, because the people don't know. I know that because of the response I get through my blog and a lot of phone calls. So all I'm saying is, let's step back, council be responsible, say, we're going to defer this. The rules and how long you are and how long it takes, that can all be worked out. And I think there should be members of council, if you set up another committee, there should be members of council on that committee. Not just people from Aird and Burles, Grant Thornton. Their presentations were fantastic. But there were a lot of caveats in that presentation. No offense, sir. And the thing is that we have to step back and have an opportunity to study it. And I'm asking you tonight, give us all a Christmas present, defer this thing. Thank you.
Is there any questions for Mr. Barker? Seeing none, thank you. Cynthia Bragg, you are up. Is Bill McClellan here? Is Bill here? Oh, yes, you are here, Bill. Sorry. You're in the wings, okay? And Cynthia, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I wanted to speak today because a big decision is about to be made and there will be no turning back. I have read the full 231-page report. The history of Guelph Hydro goes back as far as 1903, and it wasn't until 1967 that the utility came to be named Guelph Hydro. It's entirely city-owned today, and it has been a well-run and profitable company valued at $129.4 million with assets of $228 million, and has paid the city annual dividends last year equaling $1.5 million. It could continue this admirable reputation with the possibility of merging in the future with a more local and like-minded utility, which the 231-page report indicates many Guelph citizens prefer. A large proportion of Guelph citizens, including myself, deeply care about environmental sustainability and want our community to embrace cost-effective green energy and renewables and to continue on the path of conservation, and question whether Electra, a business created only 9 months ago with no proven track record, can actually deliver on this goal. We know Guelph Hydro has shown an ability to develop and invest in new technologies. I question the sell-off of the Eastview methane capture facility and the solar panels on the present hydro building, good examples of Guelph's movement in the right direction. Electra's vision, as outlined in the report, admittedly sounds exciting. A green energy and technology center dedicated to exploring green energy solutions, educating the public and businesses about them, and catalyzing, as they say, the commercialization and mass consumer adoption of green technology. I can't argue against the development and installation of electric vehicle charging stations, which Electra has already been involved in, or the promotion of net zero homes and buildings. Electra's pilot projects sound very progressive and interesting, but I worry that the Green Energy and Technology Center may end up being no more than an exhibition center with a focus mainly on demonstrations and marketing. How can we be sure that will it in fact advance the actual installation adoption of these technologies? And will Electra support, as it claims, Guelph's Community Energy Initiative and GEARS, two initiatives we should be very proud of? Besides, we already have many groups in Guelph, like eMERGE and Innovation Guelph, who can advance these goals. Many on council have likely been lured by the $18.5 million one-time dividend that would come from the merger with Electra and the promise of larger dividends in the future. My interest was captured by an article in the Guelph Mercury Tribune. A former Guelph Hydro employee, Jane Wolver, questioned the promise of higher dividends based on calculations referencing what Hamilton is about to receive as a present member community in the Electra conglomerate. Accepting the initial dividend sounds to me a lot like selling the living room furniture to pay the bills. There could be nothing left afterwards, certainly nothing Guelph controls, and again, there will be no turning back. With only a 4.63% ownership and one member on the board of a merged utility, we would have little control over decisions made, and our voice could shrink even more as Electra expands. It says right in the report that it wants to continue pursuing other merger and acquisition opportunities. And will emergency response continue to be excellent after the existing operational center possibly moves in 10 years? There is also the issue of potential privatization. There is the provision for shareholders to sell their shares to the private sector should circumstances change in the future, provided a significant number want to do so. Though the required 22% tax levy is a disincentive, council should insist that a clear majority vote is needed to privatize, or else minority shareholders should have veto rights. I am not necessarily opposed to the merger, but I am opposed to voting on it today while Guelph citizens are preoccupied with preparing for Christmas. Although a valiant effort was made to solicit public input, I question how accurately the surveys registered the true sentiments of our citizenry. The questions that asked for public input in the phone survey were extremely slanted. Example, would you support a merger of Guelph Hydro and Electra if it results in more moderate distribution rate increases that would occur if Guelph Hydro remained a standalone utility? Having voiced their primary concern about rising rates, of course, one can predict their answers. Can I go a little bit over?
I have been giving the extra 10, 15 seconds to everyone else. Why would I stop with you? Okay. So you got your extra 10, 15 seconds.
I don't feel I know enough to feel good about this merger and losing Guelph Hydro. The information we have been given has sounded to me more like a sales pitch to convince us of the preferability of merging with Electra. I think many Guelphites want more solid information before this decision is made and don't understand the rush, unless it is purely political, or the secrecy of the details of an agreement. All councillors are beholden to reflect the true wishes and values of Guelph citizens. And I say a yes vote today is premature and has not really been given a chance to accurately reflect the sentiments of our citizens.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any questions at this time? Seeing none. Thank you very much. Okay, and we're going to do another one here. Bill McCullen. And I normally at this time would say, Jonathan Webb, you're in the wings. Is Jonathan Webb here, first of all? Yes. We're going to take a break. So don't go in the wings. Okay, we're going to take a break after you, sir. Okay? So you go ahead. You have the floor.
Mr. Mayor, councillors, members of the public, I'm speaking against this merger. To use a nautical analogy, if I'm sailing around in a Corvette, I'm sure not going to jump ship and climb on the SS Titanic. Okay? The old saw, it's better to have a bird in the hand instead of two birds in the bush, applies very well to this situation. We know of Guelph Hydro's 100-year-old success, and we know very little about this newly formed body, Electra. We lose control of our energy future with this speculative merger for what is essentially a bag of money and promises with no guarantees. There's no doubt that future challenges are posed by rising rates, the rapid growth of renewable energies, and the province's extremely foolish commitment to nuclear energy. But selling off Guelph Hydro for an open-ended promise and an $18 million bribe doesn't provide any greater guaranteed stability of either energy supply or lower rates for users. So what do we know? There's no actual empirical evidence that Electra will be better or worse than Guelph Hydro as a protection against our future energy challenges. No empirical evidence at all. Guelph Hydro has a proud and verifiable history of supplying energy to Guelph dating back to 1903. We're trading in 100% ownership of a utility that has proven to be efficient, service-oriented, cost-conscious, and flexible in the extreme in responding to changing community needs. Electra has no proven track record except in promoting itself. Its existing stable of municipalities are reputed to have been less successful as single entities than our own Guelph Hydro. They can prove their current assets, but they cannot prove their effective use of them. The merger gets us less than 5% of the second largest utility in North America. We lose almost all say in what our rates will be, except for a stated period of time. Decisions that impact this community will be made by people with no commitment to our unique city, and we lose any local flexibility that we once had to adapt to future energy opportunities. Neither Guelph Hydro or Electra can make any guarantees about meeting our future needs, because there are no certainties about our future needs or about the future supply of electricity in the province. That is out of both Guelph Hydro's and Electra's hands. All else is speculation. At least Guelph Hydro has a track record. Second point, communications and feedback. In every single component of this debate, from future rates to flexibility towards disruptive technologies, Guelph Hydro's proven track record is dismissed by the sales pitch, and that's what it is, a sales pitch with counterpoints which are mount to speculation and predictions about how Electra will solve all of our problems. It's all smoke and mirrors. There's no fact based on past performance. There are rosy-colored statements about what the future will hold. Declining energy demand coupled with energy conservation practices and education and adoption of local energy innovations will go a long way to stabilize our energy future without a merger. We have a lot of energy expertise in this city, so let's use it. As we face energy volatility in the next few years, this is not a time to change vehicles to move forward. You don't change horses in the middle of a cart race. The merger is not an evidence-based decision. It's a sell job worthy of the worst of used car dealerships. This merger is a takeover, not a merger. Communications. Enough for the communication strategy that patronizes people and eschews dialogue with people in the city. Enough for the hard sell of a merger that was decided before the public had finished asking questions. And as you can see, there's an awful lot of questions. If this seems impolite, it's framed this way because trying to communicate with the city on this issue has been an exercise in being talked down to. The city has shown no interest in a real two-way dialogue. This would mean actually listening to people rather than creating surveys that elicit responses, the responses you want. And sometimes the experts are wrong. As a former teacher, I recognize when people haven't done their homework in the communications department. This merger needs to be delayed until after the next election. That requires leadership from council and more commitment on the part of city staff to identify and recognize what people in this city actually want. Thank you.
Question. Is there any questions for Bill? Councillor Salisbury.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Phil, I wonder if you could, sorry?
I'm Phil.
Bill, I'm sorry. I apologize. I wonder if you could expand upon, you mentioned that communicating with the city on this issue was an exercise in being talked down to. Are you saying that this was your experience over the phone, by email? What are you referring to?
On the website, every time, on various things on the on Facebook, City of Guelph responds on their Facebook page, and I was being talked down to. There's no doubt about it. It was almost dismissive. It was, we know better than you. That's it. So, I mean, I've also seen I've seen all of the literature that has been handed out. I've been to open meetings, open house meetings, and really there is no desire to do anything other than to give you some pat answers and hope you go away.
I hear what you're saying. Were you able to get answers to your questions on a technical nature?
I didn't ask technical questions.
Okay.
That's it. Thank you very much. Oh yeah, I said a break. So, it is 5 after 9. We will start again at 9:15. That's 10-minute break.